Having spent a lot of time working on, staring at, and trying to not sell this 2003 Outlander, I found that it is a car that I seriously don't enjoy driving. I don't like the way it feels. It just feels like it's ready to topple over hard cornering. The ride's jittery. The car feels like it's down on power, and it feels like the connection between the steering wheel and the wheels isn't always there, and this is a fully sorted example. So I figured, what would it be like if you've had another genre of car that do the same job as this, but a bit cheaper and also a bit different in the way it was regurgitated to you? So, look this way. Yep, this is a 2000 Mitsubishi Lancer Wagon. I know what you're thinking. Mitsubishi, same company, same car. Why on earth did they do this? Well, it's very simple. This is actually on the older platform of Lancer than the Outlander, and this was aimed at Japanese businesses wanting something that could cart around supplies on the cheap, and then they made a civilian version of it because Mitsubishi thought, well, why not? People would want a wagon version of the Lancer. Sold in other countries as the Libero, interesting name, and also sold here as the Lancer Wagon from 1992 to 2003. So the Outlander and this car were for sale for a period of time. But many chose the Outlander, even though this car was cheaper. A lot cheaper. So I'm going to show you the differences and similarities between these two cars and tell you which one I think is a better buy.
In terms of driving dynamics, the Lancer Wagon is a much better car to drive than the Outlander. Despite the older torsion beam rear suspension, the lower centre of gravity means that the Lancer Wagon is a much better handling car and also a much better riding car as well. Despite the newer semi-trailing arm rear suspension on the Outlander, the Lancer is still better with the old torsion beam rear end. However, one thing that does make the Lancer a better car is also the fact that the steering rack I find to be a much nicer setup than the one that's in the Outlander. Steering's a lot more direct, and that's obviously because the car's lower down, but also I like the feel of the older rack compared to the newer one that you see in the Outlander. In terms of engines, they're both powered by Mitsubishi's Sirius engine that's been in pretty much every four-cylinder Mitsubishi dating back from 1976 to 2013. However, in the Lancer, it's the 4G63 configuration with a 1.8 litre inline 4, and the Outlander the 4G64 with a 2.4 litre inline 4. With the Lancer having 86 kilowatts and 161 newton meters of torque, and the Outlander 100 kilowatts and 205 newton meters of torque. However, the Lancer is 2 seconds faster from 0 to 100 as the fact that it is a lighter car than the Outlander by a staggering 500 kilograms. 1060 for the Lancer and 1565 for the Outlander. But also, they both manage to 4-speed transmissions, and the 4G63 seems to wear the 4-speed box much better than the 4G64. The 4G64 feels a bit ponderous with the 4-speed box. So, the Lancer is significantly lighter, and that's one of the reasons why it handles better and rides better than the Outlander. Weight. Something that you can't escape with an SUV, and that is excessive weight, because everything has to be higher up in terms of componentry. There's more travel in the suspension, but also all the heavier parts in the body are much higher. So it's not just the greater weight, but also the greater center of gravity. You would think there'd be a benefit in the SUV compared to the Wagon in terms of luggage capacity, but alas, you are wrong. The Lancer has a bigger boot than the Outlander. The Lancer has less rear seat though than the Outlander in terms of space, and also the rear seats in the Lancer don't have a headrest, whereas the Outlanders do. So, in all fairness, the Outlander's rear seats are much nicer to sit in than the Lancers, but the boot is significantly smaller. It's only when you fold the rear seats down in the Outlander that the boot's actually bigger than the Lancer. However, this means that if you are carrying 5 people, the station wagon is actually more capacious than the SUV, which is a bit of a surprise to most people. In terms of the cockpit, the Outlander has a much newer cockpit and has a much nicer dashboard and also feels a lot nicer to sit in. So if you're comparing the Outlander to this generation of Lancer, it's a much nicer place to be. It also has more safety features. Even though there's 3 years difference between these two cars, in terms of design, there's a whopping 10 years between the Lancer Wagon and the Outlander. However, these two were for sale for the same period of time in 2003. Between February and December 2003, you could buy both of these from a Mitsubishi dealership. So you are actually looking at two cars that were sold at some point side by side, albeit for a very short period of time. Although, one thing I did notice with the Outlander is that the seats, front driver and front passenger seats, both feel very rigid and upright because they've got this built-in armrest. And it's actually really uncomfortable to get a good driving position, something that isn't as much of a problem in the Lancer. However, the biggest elephant in the room with the SUV is value for money. For $6,500, you could buy yourself 3 of these 2000 Lancer wagons for the price of one 2003 Outlander. $6,500, you could buy yourself a very nice 2007 Lancer wagon for the same money as an 03 Outlander. Now, Outlanders are more expensive than their Lancer wagon counterparts. And that's because the SUV genre is more popular in the used market than the station wagon. By contrast, that was also the same when it was new. The Lancer wagon, the car you see here in 2000, was specified to about $23,000 with optional airbag for the driver and optional cruise control. The Outlander was $37,990 in 2003. So it was a more expensive car, even though they were going after a very similar genre in terms of the family car. But between the two, when you're coming to buy one now, your money's going to go a lot further in a wagon than it will in an SUV. Even though the SUV might have more passive safety features, the wagon is likely to not have an accident compared to the SUV in terms of its drivability. You'll be able to avoid the object with the wagon that you'll hit with the SUV. So that's what I found when driving the two. It's not just the passive safety, it's the active safety as well.
So between the station wagon version of a hatchback and an SUV on the same platform, which one is better? Well, in terms of driving dynamics, this one is better. In terms of value for money, this one is better. In terms of price, this one is better. In terms of room and space, well, in terms of headroom, the SUV is better. Boot space with the seats up, this one's better. Boot space with the seats down, this one is better. In terms of safety, passive safety, this has more of it. Then again, it's a newer car. Active safety though, this is likely to miss the object that this one will hit. And also in terms of reliability, fewer components on this car that are likely to go wrong. And again, it'll share more with the equivalent hatchback than this one, so parts are cheaper and easier to find, especially Mitsubishis. And also, in terms of the driver comfort, dare I say it, this is actually a better car than that one, probably because this car was aimed at people who were slightly bigger than the average tiny person this was designed for. But in all fairness, the rear seat capacity and rear seat space, this is a better buy. The rear seats are better in this than they are in this one. This is made for someone else to ride in it, this one's made for you to drive in it. Personally, I take this one. I take the wagon over the SUV every day of the week and twice on Sunday. This car does not make me want to drive it. This one, it's a lot better. It's actually tolerable. This one isn't. Simple as that.